This is Boob Tube Boys. I am Brian Vaughn, and I'm joined by two other people. They are Van Lee.
Hello.
And Spencer Hendricks.
Hello as well.
And this is another of our Thanksgiving special show weeks, where we choose a show we actually all three know and like, and then talk about that instead of talking about Tim Allen.
This is the third time around. We did Seinfeld first, Simpsons the second time, and here we are with The Office.
Time flies, doesn't it, guys?
It sure does.
When you're having fun.
Our third one of these. And it's always a little different when it's a show that we like, because we don't have to focus so much on, and know, like, what is this show even, and why do we hate it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we know a little bit, we know a lot of bit more as we come into this one, but I found it jarring to do the normal Boob Tube Boys research that I would do and enjoy it from a sense of genuinely enjoying the show, because we haven't had that in a while. I mean, we've had a string of just the worst sitcoms imaginable, and here we are with one that I like, and I'll be critical of it, particularly as we get into the later episodes we're going to cover, but it is still beloved by me.
Sure, and I think it's kind of fun covering this, a sitcom we like, after covering a lot of sitcoms that we really did not.
It's a good switch. I guess that's kind of the theory behind why we ever wanted to do this themed week in the first place.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we figured that we would be covering some stuff that didn't go down so well. And this is kind of a palate cleanser for all of us.
Yeah, it definitely is. So first off, this is our overview episode where we just talk about the show in general. We do this every time around. And then after that, each of us has selected an episode to discuss and host. I think Van and I picked favorites. Spencer wanted to see what happened after he checked out from the series.
Mm-hmm.
He also selected several episodes that were two-parters back to back to back. How do you do that so well?
Honestly, in this case, now that I've seen the episode list again, it's not that hard to do. I had no memory of there being so many two-part Office episodes. I thought they were all 22 minutes and they were just one part. But it turns out there's two parts all over the place. Brian, that he's going to cover later this week, is at 28 minutes without commercials randomly. The other two are 22.
The first extended episode of The Office.
So they're just kind of all over the place. And yeah, the ones I wanted to cover around the time that Michael leaves the show, they just couldn't leave it alone. They had to be like, let's do a two-parter and make the impact really felt. So I had to really cherry pick to get one that was only one episode and 22 minutes in that time period.
The show had gotten a lot more popular around season 4, right when the writer's strike of 2008 happened. And then NBC wanted a lot of double episodes when they came back. And that started a run for really the rest of the time the show was on of too many episodes that were too long.
And we're, of course, going to basically be covering the standard 22-minute episodes of the show. If you watch it on Peacock, they do have the extended versions where they've added the deleted scenes, and it's almost like a director's cut. We're not covering those. It doesn't matter. When we do these shows, we're going to take a lighter look at them than we typically do, because it's mostly just the experience of watching them and talking about that episode or our experience with the show. So keep that in mind as we review it.
Experience and analysis, because this is a really popular show. There's information everywhere on it.
Just like the Boob Tube Boys.
Yeah, but definitely just like The Simpsons or Seinfeld. We should say, first off, the American edition of The Office is, of course, based on the UK version of The Office, which was created by Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant. It only ran for a couple of years and some holiday specials. They were done with it then. They had wrapped it up plot-wise and everything. And then it started to become a cult hit in America. I think the DVD boom was a help with that. More people were getting to see that version of The Office and appreciate that sort of comedy.
Have either of you guys watched the original British version?
I think I tried a few episodes of it back way, when I was first watching the American Office, not anytime recently.
Similar to me. I think I watched a handful of them. I can understand the importance of it, and I can see why it was successful in a sense, but it's bleak.
I remember thinking, this is totally fine. I don't mind this at all, but I prefer our American version.
Which is rare. I would never have expected going in the end that I'd be like, no, I want the guns blazing American version, but it is better.
That was my takeaway too, exactly what you guys said. And I think the public one overall, I think one of the big innovations Steve Carell brought to the main character, the office manager, which for Gervais was David Brent and Michael Scott, of course, for Steve Carell, was that he made his character more of like a big boy, kind of childlike and unself-aware, versus unself-aware and mean and petty. Now, Michael is that also.
Sure, but in a more innocent way.
Yeah.
You said the little boy aspect. I can't see Ricky Gervais doing the Michael Scott role. I just can't see it. I don't know if he's capable of it.
You don't find Ricky Gervais likable?
I mean,
No.
that's the whole thing. And I know that I'm not complaining about it at all. I know British people have that sort of very sarcastic sense of humor, very dry, which some of it resonates with me and some of it does seem a little bit like, holy shit, they're so mean.
Have either of you heard of Philomena Kunk?
No.
No, I've seen the movie Philomena.
No, not
Is
that.
it related?
No, this is a British comedian, and she basically plays a kind of sassy interviewer, and it is apparently taking Britain by storm. And I watched a YouTube video or two of it, and I remember, this is before I found out how popular it is, I remember thinking like, that was fine at times. But apparently they think it is just the funniest fucking thing in the world, and I implore our audience to go watch it. And again, there's some humor to it, but it's kind of like Monty Python is what I think of. It's like there are some Monty Python bits that are amazing, and then there's a whole lot of them just being British. And it's like, that's not funny at all. So I find the whole Philomena Kunk thing fascinating, but you guys should look this up later.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Good name.
I do think, though, what you said earlier, Van, was also everyone's fear who liked the UK version, which is it's going to be taken to American television and dumbed down and smashed into a box for network TV, especially knowing it was going to be on network TV. That's obviously not what happened, but at the time there was that fear. It went on to become a very popular show. It's gained a lot more popularity in the streaming and syndication era. There are a lot of podcasts and books about it by the cast and other people. I read a book called The Office, The Untold Story of the Greatest Sitcom of the 2000s by Andy Green. Has a lot of good interviews. It's a really good book as far as just kind of all-encompassing the run of the series. And I'm going to really quick retroactively mention some books I may or may not have mentioned in previous BTB episodes where I feel like I always was saying, I don't remember who wrote this or the name. So when we covered Seinfeld and Mary Tyler Moore, that was Seinfeldia and Marion Lou and Rhoda and Ted, both by Jennifer Keeshan Armstrong, Springfield Confidential by Mike Reese and Matthew Klickstein, and then I also casually mentioned a book on black horror recently, and that was The Black Guy Dies First, Black Horror from Fodder to Oscar by Mark H. Harris and Robin R. Means Coleman, and now I feel I've done right by authors.
You got your citations in there. Our bibliography is correct. We're good to go. Can I rant about The Office Ladies for a brief moment?
Sure.
Yeah, this is exactly when I planned for you to do this, Van, because I'd like to say about this book, everyone came across really well. The author did a good job. Now, would you like to tell us about a piece of media you don't feel that way about?
I loathe it. And if we're getting new listeners who love The Office or The Office Ladies, that's great. I want to remind you that I can be critical of something, and that's not an attack on you explicitly, which unfortunately everyone on the internet believes.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't like the same thing I do, you must hate me.
But that's not
the
true.
case.
And I would go so far as to say you would not be so interested in a detailed critique of The Office Ladies if you didn't like their performances in the show and like The Office.
Exactly. Well, the show itself is hosted by Angela Kinsey and Jenna Fisher, and they basically just go through each episode of The Office, kind of like we do with the Boob Tube Boys. They're far less detailed than we are.
Now, they don't talk about Legend of the Hidden Temple.
They haven't yet, but here's the problem I have with this. Those two are actors. They're trained actors. In some cases, Angela Kinsey, I believe, is a comedian. She's a comedic actress. She's an improv actress. They are not podcasters. They are bad at actually podcasting. You'll get both of them just ranting or rambling. They're not funny. They don't make jokes. And they're super successful because they were in the show The Office. And I hate that. I really don't like
Nothing about necromancy.
I'm not going to say that. There
Okay.
was Angela talking about donkey jizz at one point, and that is not
Okay.
a joke.
Well, that's interesting, at least. I mean, was it Dwight related, I'm guessing?
No, it was Joe Rogan related.
Worse, somehow.
Yeah, it was Fear Factor. That's why Fear Factor got canceled,
Oh.
by the way. But anyway, I loathe the Office Ladies podcast. If you enjoy it, that's great. Go ahead and listen to it. But I implore you, please check out other podcasts by people who are dedicated to their craft and not just doing this for money, because they put in ad breaks every 15 minutes, and it's 3-minute ad breaks. And these are two millionaires. Let me put that out there. They make so much money off residuals from The Office. They're doing fine. So part of it is the money aspect that drives me nuts. But also, their show's just bad. It's a bad podcast, and it's just nostalgia fest. And yes, we're about to do a nostalgia fest on The Office, but we try to implore actual criticism and we try to make it fun.
Yeah. When there's something we think is good or bad, I like to think we're going to analyze why that is. I think, podcasting has been co-opted by celebrities largely, as everything has been, but that, that there's still some space for us to talk about Growing Pains and The Office this week.
There, I feel better.
Van has gotten his office lady stuff out of his system. We're all feeling light on our feet. So we'll talk a little bit more about the start of the American Office. It was developed by Greg Daniels, who is pretty famous for a lot of TV things. Saturday Night Live, The Simpsons, King of the Hill being the main ones. And he got the call kind of from NBC, we want you to run the show, to develop it, to turn it into what it's going to be. And he worked with Gervais and Merchant to do that. So he was, they all got along well, similar comedic sensibilities in some ways. Both versions of the show are set in a paper company. They're both supposed to derive humor from character and situations, awkwardness versus here's a joke or a pratfall. I mean, there's going to be some of that, but there was supposed to be a sense of realism and a fly-on-the-wall, voyeuristic feel, like a reality TV show feel to how it's filmed, which is one of its big landmark contributions to TV, I would say.
It's definitely one of the first, or certainly the first, truly successful workplace comedy that really was workplace. Like, if you've been in an office setting, you've worked at the office before. You can see these weird people because there are always weird people in offices. Whereas I think other workplace shows, like, for example, Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place, that's not very realistic.
No, there'd be at least like 10 more people there.
And not Ryan Reynolds. He wouldn't work there.
He doesn't do that. He's an actor. Yeah, exactly. And that's what this is supposed to do, is simulate an actual random city American workplace environment. And the specificity that the characters get, especially by season 2, really lends to that, of the people feel more realistic by feeling so narrow, almost. Some of the details that allow the characters to be funny in about 5 seconds, depending on what the scene is, because you know them so well. Whenever Daniels and everyone else involved with the show were trying to cast the main roles, the Michael Scott role of the kind of, we already mentioned, unself-aware, sometimes petty, sometimes childlike manager, came down to 2 people, Steve Carell and Bob Odenkirk. And then Steve Carell winds up getting the role. And I guess everyone involved with The Office felt really bad at the time for Bob Odenkirk, because he wasn't on Breaking Bad yet. It hadn't started. And Mr. Show was done. And they were kind of like, oh, we really like this guy. And we think he would be really good in this role. But Steve Carell's just obviously perfect for it.
I think I agree with that. I think Steve Carell is perfect. I think Bob Odenkirk would have done a fine job.
I do too, weirdly.
But I don't know that it would be as good.
No, there's something about Steve Carell's mania.
Yeah.
That is just, it gives the role something really special. He's perfect at this.
And I can get behind Steve Carell as having the good little qualities that seep in and out, and occasionally he succeeds. As Michael Scott. Bob Odenkirk, I feel, would be more dirtbaggy. Maybe not totally like David Brent from The English Office, but I don't know. I just feel like he would play it a little more dirtbaggy, like he does later on in the series when he makes a guest appearance as a boss that interviews with.
The funny thing about him, too, is I don't know if I'm clouded by it or not, but I tend to agree with you. But is it because I saw like 10 years of TV of Bob Odenkirk playing an all-time dirtbag?
Yeah.
That
plays into it.
He did have a bit of a redeeming act, of course, in Better Call Saul, where it turns out at the end he did right by Kim and everyone that he could, and kind of had the opportunity to get out of everything he did wrong and then didn't. So he got better to me, and Bob Odenkirk as a whole, over the course of especially Better Call Saul, but Breaking Bad too, really rose high in terms of like my opinion. There were several opportunities to watch him act that I came away thoroughly impressed with.
He's great.
I would have been just fine with him at the wheel of this without knowing it at the time. But yeah, you really can't top what Steve Carell did.
Watching the episodes we did, and I watched a good 10 others over the last couple weeks, I again was pretty blown away by Steve Carell. I think the whole cast of The Office is really good. I think he is far and away the standout, though.
Yeah,
I mean, the nuance he gets to show.
There's something to be said for the fact that I didn't even know, actually, that Bob Odenkirk was considered for it. But the fact that it came down to those 2 guys that is a lot of talent.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing to think of how good you would have to be to get the role that they had for Michael Scott. I'm very impressed by that. That's awesome.
It's wild that it was that competitive.
Wild, crazy stuff.
More Johnny Carson talk. I hope this continues. The other main roles in the series, we're going to talk about the series leads today, were Dwight Schrute, who's a beet farmer, paper salesman, Jim Halpert, who's sort of the audience surrogate a bit, a guy who's a little too put together to be working at Dunder Mifflin, but still does, and who is secretly in love with the receptionist, Pam, who is played by Jenna Fisher, as Van mentioned earlier when saying that he hated the office ladies. Those roles are all cast very well. We've talked about Steve Carell. Rainn Wilson is just about as good in his capacity. His role does not offer the same range, but oh my God, does he do his role perfectly?
Well, I think in this case, Steve Carell did well because he's a good actor. I think in this case, Rainn Wilson does well because he's a fucking weird creep for the most part.
Right.
I don't mean that meanly. Like,
no, I think
he's
you
nice
mean that
guy.
lovingly.
Yeah, but he is a creep in real life, and he's got that weird religion he's part of, which great, follow whatever religion you want, but it's
like Zeox or something.
It's called like the Ba'ath something or other, and it's got some weird views with it, but he's just a weird dude. He does a great job in the show because he's a weird dude.
I'm not sure I've ever seen him take on a normal person in any of his roles.
What are you talking about? He's really normal in 6 Feet
That's
Under.
the other one that came to mind, and
He's
can't think
weirder
of,
than Dwight in that show.
I can't think of anything he's ever done where he's just supposed to be. And look at that guy's face. He knows exactly what he's trying to do.
What episode of The Office does someone call him Moon-Faced Kid?
Yeah, Billy, the guy
Yeah.
in the wheelchair calls him that when he crashes into the pole.
Yeah, that's when he gets the concussion.
Yep.
Oh, that's a great episode.
And vomits on his
That's
hood of his
the
car.
Waffle Iron, the Michael Iron.
Oh, yeah. There was one role I know that Rainn Wilson played kind of a straight man, and it was House of 1,000 Corpses. Is that what it's called, the Rob Zombie movie?
Yeah. Even the name of it, even if he's playing a straight man, but that's the kind of movie Rainn Wilson could be the normal guy in.
Yep, he gets killed. It's great.
I think he plays like a big maniac in that shark movie, The Meg.
The Meg, yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't seen that. I think a show like this that's filmed like a documentary too, like the facial expressions, I think everybody in the cast gets pretty good at them by the end of the series.
Well, one main actor does it too much.
Well, that's the thing. Everybody, I shouldn't say by the end of the series. By the end of the series, everybody's going overboard.
Oh, they flanderized every character.
You're playing to the
It
cheap
got
seats.
bad.
Yeah.
It got really bad towards the end.
We've talked about, the main members of the cast. I already mentioned we'll touch on the kind of secondary and tertiary members as we go along. I did want to talk a little bit more about the Michael Scott character because he's so crucial and because he changes a lot from season 1 to 2. Season 1, first off, the pilot episode is almost verbatim the same script as the British one. And Michael Scott is meaner in the first 6 episodes.
And he's got that hair going on.
Yeah.
I think that's not much of a secret, but he did something to his hair. I think in some places they've said, no, he just quit slicking it back, but it's pretty clear, and good for him, that he did some work.
He got hair work done and he lost a lot of weight.
Yeah, he became like a fitness freak.
Was because he was getting into movies at this time.
Yeah.
After being done with The Daily Show, getting the Office job, he'd actually already filmed 40-Year-Old Virgin when he auditioned for The Office, but it hadn't come out yet. And it came out after season 1 of The Office came out, so Steve Carell kind of became a bigger star between seasons, which helped the show a lot.
And helped NBC, because they would have had to pay a hell of a lot more up front. Because they probably signed him to a few-year deal. This is speculation, but yeah, they kept the dollar number down after that.
When changing Michael, Steve Carell playing him was a big part of that, making him, more humane. The book I read mentioned a few of the writers specifically and how they thought about Michael and how they thought the other writers handled Michael's character, which Mindy Kaling supposedly was the most, she also plays Kelly Kapoor in the show. She had Michael be the most feminine and nurturing, sort of. That's where he really wants kids comes from, like to make him kind of a little bit more lovable in that sense of like, that's why he's kind of childlike. Michael Schur, who plays Cousin Mose, White's, I don't think he ever speaks. He might make a noise or something. Cousin.
He says a little.
Yeah. Was the one that kind of made Michael weirdly humanitarian in general sometimes. Like, have feelings when you wouldn't think so, or have a good opinion when you wouldn't think so. And then Paul Lieberstein, who is a writer, later showrunner, and plays Toby, Michael's nemesis, perhaps fittingly, always enjoyed making Michael the dumbest. So he was the one that essentially, when Michael would do something really stupid, that was probably him. We've already hit on the fact that the show goes downhill, at least in our eyes, a little bit toward the end of the run. Well, Greg Daniels and Mike Schur both left after season 4 to start Parks and Rec. And Greg Daniels would be kind of involved a little bit and then come back full-time for the final season, but he was basically not involved full-time from, I think, season 5 through 8. So the show did start to feel a little different and get more, slapsticky, more broad comedy, things like that.
And that's not to say that there weren't good moments.
There are a lot.
5 and 6 were fine. There were good moments in there. If I'm remembering correctly, season 7 really started to go downhill, and those final couple of years are just atrocious.
I think that and we'll talk about this, but even in season 7, there are redeeming moments, but it's not like the prime of the show. You've just exhausted your ideas by then. For me, the real stride is seasons 2 through 5. It's really 2 through 4, but there's a lot of really good ones in 5. We're going to talk about sort of our history with the show and some analysis of it, but I had a few stray things that I just came across and wanted to mention because I found them kind of interesting. Rainn Wilson also auditioned for Michael Scott, and even he felt like, oh, this is not good. He auditioned for Dwight, and everyone was like, yeah, this guy's weird, Dwight's weird, this works.
This'll do.
Yeah. Other people who auditioned for Dwight included Patton Oswalt and Seth Rogen, strangely, both who seemed too normal.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think they, could play weirder, but I don't know. I think if you met Rainn Wilson, you could believe that's Dwight, as you pointed out, Van. Speaking of Dwight, there was going to be a Dwight spinoff called The Farm.
Farm, yeah.
And they shot a pilot. And when it didn't go through, when the show a lot of people said it was just really bad, that had laid eyes on it. They repurposed the footage for this. It might have been a season 9 episode that I've only seen once that takes place at Schrute Farms.
I remember there was a thing where he was trying to seduce a woman, or not seduce, but court, and he had to leave a beat at their table or something. It wasn't great.
Looking back on it now, it makes a lot more sense. Like, why are there characters here we've never met?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why. It was supposed to be a new show. I wanted to mention a character who we don't talk about in our 3 episodes, which is Amy Ryan's Holly Flax, who is an HR employee who winds up marrying Michael. And that's the reason he leaves Scranton. He moves to, I think, Boulder, Colorado with her. So we were originally going to cover the episode where he leaves, but we didn't because it's 3 hours long. So I wanted to go ahead and say she's really good in that role.
She's great.
Yeah.
Perfect for Michael.
That's a fantastic pairing, too, because she's the one who actually gets him. She's the only one who is being weird as shit and she likes it. And even Jim comments at one point where he's like, Michael is killing it with Holly.
Yeah, this is actually working for some reason.
And then it's pretty emotional when she leaves the show because Michael's like, God damn it, I hate Jan. I don't want to go back to Jan.
Come on, David Wallace.
And I didn't know who Amy Ryan was when we watched those episodes, but I've seen her in The Wire since then. And I enjoy her character in that show as well. So good job, Amy Ryan.
I think she won or was nominated for an Academy Award at one point, too.
Probably.
Yeah, she's really good, and she makes the Holly character understand Michael and be enough like Michael to where it makes sense, but also more level-headed in a way that makes her, like, grounded. Where you wouldn't think they would just die in a fire together, not knowing how to live.
You know what kind of pairing that is, as far as that's who they were meant for, and you see a couple others that don't work as well in the show? Is like Jess and Rory and Gilmore Girls, which Van would know all about.
Oh, yeah. He's always talking about that.
They get along so well. Their camaraderie, their charisma. It's so great. Is Rory the main one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Quick note, there were also some other potential gems. Adam Scott was one of them. Also, John Cho was another. And theme song kind of rules. It's really short. It's catchy. It gets out of the way. It used to stick in my head back when I first heard it.
It definitely is time and place for me at this point.
Yeah.
It takes me right back those 17 years before, like when we first started watching the show.
Right in the nostalgia bone.
Oh, yeah.
Which is one of the 8 bones.
Which shit. Wow, the nostalgia bone. Let's talk about our history with this show.
It all started at the same point, that's for sure.
Gather around the fire. The way I remember it is Van introduced the show to us, to Spencer and
Seems
me, I
likely.
believe. After seasons 1 and 2 were put out on DVD, but before season 3 had started. This is my memory, at least. We watched the first 2 seasons 4,000 times, probably. They are great. I remember everything about them, and I remember when season 2 was over, of course, the cliffhanger thing being a real a real pain in the neck because I wanted to know what happened.
And no one thought from the first 6 or whatever that season 1 was, no one thought the show was going to take that turn. So I remember at 22 years old watching them go that direction and start introducing the drama element in season 2, because season 1 is just all silly office stuff. It's funny, it's well done, but it's all work-based and there's not a lot of stakes.
And a little more, I don't want to say edgelordy, but a little more like, we're going to just make Michael say an offensive thing and that be his means of being a fool.
Yeah, they started making it a totally different thing. And I remember thinking, I'm not sure I've seen anything. And again, I'm 22, so I don't really know if I knew what I was talking about. But at that time I was watching that, I'm thinking, I'm not sure I've ever seen a comedy do this well at introducing drama into it. I was very impressed. And I remain thinking that The Office pulled that combination off as well as any show I've ever seen, in season 2 specifically.
I remember how I first saw it, and it was my mom came up to me and she said, "You like Steve Carell, right?" Because what was the time frame with 40-Year-Old Virgin?
I think it came out right after season 1 of The Office did.
Okay, so it must not have been that, because I watched the first episode of The American Office the night it came on. I remember explicitly sitting down to watch it.
But we were both
It was
familiar with
probably
him
Daily
through the
Show.
Daily Show.
Okay, that makes sense. Because she was like, "I know you like Steve Carell. He's got a show. You should check it out." So I turned it on and I watched it, and I thought the episode was great. And then I think there was a pretty big gap between season 1 and 2 because they weren't greenlit for a while.
Right.
And they eventually were. So I had seen the first season when it came out. Then when season 2 came out, I saw a couple, and that's when I introduced you guys, because I know we watched a lot of the season 2 episodes for the first time together.
I remembered watching those 6 in season 1 together and loving it. And I had thought there was a bit of a delay before we got season 2.
Yeah, that may be what I'm thinking of with the delay.
I could be wrong, but I thought there was a little bit of a cliffhanger. We were like, there's only 6 and this is so awesome. I can't wait.
It was probably 2 cliffhangers because then we got our hands on season 2 and then there's another we have to wait deal. Spencer, what you said was one of my big takeaways too, which is in the prime of The American Office, it really balanced the comedy and drama really well. The lack of soundtrack is another thing this show did well that I think we take for granted when the show started, that was kind of still not that common.
Which you're going to find out in the coming weeks. We've got a show that we've already previewed that we'll be talking about that plays soundtrack nonstop, and it's just whimsy music, and it's horrible.
I also like just how much they don't do a lot with background noises at all. So whatever they're doing in the scene really stands out. For me, it's almost like an ASMR when they touch something in the office or when they're opening like a wrapper or something.
Using a stapler.
You can really hear every little nuance in the sound, and it's just delightful for some reason.
This is a show that, as much as about anything, gives me the warm blanket feel now. And part of it is that. I honestly prefer the episodes, for the most part, not prefer, but I like when recently I watched like 4 in a row where they were all just set in the office. And
I love those.
And it was very cozy.
There's
Everybody
something,
just making
too,
their little jokes.
I can hear, like, I don't know if it's just maybe random office, like the click of the keys, and especially Jenna Fisher when she does her quiet scenes, her voice is perfect for that.
Yeah.
It's just so soothing. And I could probably do like a meditation where Jenna Fisher's talking and there's office noise in the background.
But not if it was a podcast.
No, maybe she should change that. You probably don't need Angela for this because I don't think I would be relaxing. I don't think Angela could relax me, but Pam should just change her podcast, do like just type and talk. Maybe she could pretend to be a customer service person.
Couldn't be worse.
We're only covering 3 episodes of the million that this show aired across its 9 seasons. Are there any episodes or moments or anything that either of you wanted to mention having any specific memory of or just liking a lot?
The episode I almost selected for this is one that I don't think a lot of people like, but I adore it. And it's Beach Day in season 3.
That was my runner-up, yeah.
One of my favorite moments that I remember laughing my ass off during 2 of them in that episode. One is when Stanley and Jim are wrestling in the fat suits, and the look on Stanley's face and the noise he makes, and Jim is terrified for his life. Beautiful. And then also Andy falling into the lake and Angela sabotaging him because he's on the opposite team. And she's like, "What, Andy? I don't know what you want." And he goes, "Look at what I'm doing and then tell someone that." made me laugh so hard.
I think he specifically says, tell someone it.
Yeah.
Which still makes me laugh, that line reading, when I think about it. Beach Day also has Pam's big, courageous speech at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another one of the, and we'll get into this right away when we cover Casino Night, but the episodes where everybody sort of gets a moment or whatever are great, once you know the cast really well. And that Beach Day is one of those.
It's been so long since I've seen most of these. I think you guys have kept up with rewatching a little better than I have over the years, but I don't remember a lot of them very clearly. When we talk about it, I'm going to get like memories of 6 or 7 episodes as we go, and we've already done a little bit of that. But the part that I remember not knowing what they were going to do and really loving, and I wish we'd had a chance to delve into it more specifically, but instead we kind of jump right through it from our first episode to the next, is the first merger when we first got introduced to Andy's character. I forget what that even happened for.
Jim transfers.
Okay. And
then that branch folds.
Right, and they merge together. So we meet all those new characters at once. That whole time period, I didn't know what was going to happen in that. I didn't know if they were end up getting rid of all those guys or who was going to stay, who was going to go. And I remember thinking those were all just so good. And meeting Andy was a real delight. And he really stands out even in the 2 that we covered that he's in. I always knew I liked Andy, but I think I didn't appreciate him as much as I do now, honestly.
I think you can tell that Spencer hasn't finished the show by his glowing remarks about Andy, because Andy is fantastic in the first so many seasons he's on there. And then they make him the boss because Ed Helms had success with the Hangover movies, and he becomes one of, if not the worst characters.
I believe it.
In the book I read, the writers, they did not like how it went, and they felt they shouldn't have made the choices they did, essentially, with making Andy boss. But that is a big part of why, is if we did want to keep the show going longer, Ed Helms might be becoming a star.
Yeah, he's got a big name. We can keep that attached
but
to it.
But that character didn't have the same appeal as a boss. The appeal is this is someone who is just a spoiled rich brat who doesn't know how to do anything, who went to Cornell but still can't be successful with everything handed to him.
And then you made him successful.
Yeah, it doesn't work. But he's fantastic early on. And in season 7, when we see him, he has a couple of funny line reads.
Oh, yeah.
In Van's episode, he's got a moment that I just actually snort laughed. Just the way he enters the scene and the way I'd forgotten. I won't spoil any of it because when we talk about it, it's going to be really funny. But just the way he delivered his line and the character he's supposed to be, which is at this point kind of a douchebag even. I know later, probably unintentional douchebag. He's supposed to be annoying and he just really nails it. Great job, Andy Bernard.
I mentioned earlier that this show's grown in popularity through streaming. It's kind of weird to think about it now because I think of it sort of on a level of popularity and cultural, knownness up there with about anything now.
Yeah, that's true.
And it wasn't for a while.
No, I mean, during its actual time on the air, I don't know that it was ever a top 50 show on the air. And even though it was the most popular comedy on NBC, but it wasn't touching the comedies like the broad ones like 2.5 Men or Big Bang Theory. I don't even think half the viewership. And now, all this time later, this is one of those stories, at least, where you can say, this is a Pixies deal, where everybody's like, this is good. We know this is good now.
Yeah, no, this is a good show. Those other ones aren't, but they appeal to a mass audience. So given enough time and put in front of enough eyes, a good show will appeal to audiences.
And it wasn't ever unpopular, but it went from something that was a little more, it didn't feel like your aunt watched it when we were watching it, and now everyone knows it.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the whole time it was, I think, airing the episodes in the moment, in the run before syndication, I should say. I don't think my dad really knew anything about it, and then years later when it was starting to become more and more mainstream, he'd mention it to me.
Yeah.
And it was weird because for me it was like, oh, I watched that 10 years ago. I'm not really that familiar with this now.
TV show? Is it on Nick at Night now?
It definitely started spreading to where I think everybody who had watched a TV show had seen some Office and probably liked it.
Van and I finished the whole series. Spencer, you made it through season probably, 5?
It wouldn't have been more than 5. I'd have to look at the episodes, but do you guys remember offhand how season 5 ends?
That's the first one with Holly, I believe, right? So towards the end of it is when David Wallace sends her away.
Yeah, I saw that. I did see the Saber thing, the transition to Saber and Aaron and
That's
all those.
season 6.
Okay, so I got into 6 then. There was a cliffhanger at the end of one where Pam is pregnant.
I think that is the end of season 6.
I didn't go past that.
That's a
Good
finale.
for you.
It didn't
good
look
way
like
out.
it needed to be done anymore. It was like, that's good enough.
You could have ended it there, really. And I say this as someone who thinks the actual finale is fine.
It is fine.
I thought it was pretty
It does
good.
the job.
Was the finale the actual wedding, Pam and Jim's wedding, or was that just towards the end?
Dwight and Angela getting married.
Okay, because I ended up seeing Pam and Jim's wedding episode much later on just regular TV.
Yeah, and I think that happens in season 7, maybe.
I think it's before that.
Maybe 6.
Okay, so they've already covered that then by the episode I'm doing, possibly. Okay.
Yeah, but the actual series finale is Dwight and Angela's wedding, and it is a year after the documentary crew is done filming them.
And that final season, they really got back to this is a documentary. They would show, like the cameraman was a character.
I'm assuming that's because they re-involved Greg Daniels to some extent or
Could be.
whatever.
I would assume so. And so the finale is the only time Michael Scott returns also. And he's just, I think wisely, they didn't advertise it. He's just there in 2 scenes.
Yeah, it's not a, here he is, he's back. It's a, the gang's back together
that's
again.
cool.
Yeah.
That must have been a nice feeling for people who made it all the way through from the beginning.
Did you finish the series around the same time? But let me give you an example. The final season I put off for like 8 years.
I watched it live.
You watched it live. Okay, I did not do that. Those last couple of years were so bad to me that I said, I'm just not going to do it. And then one day I sat down and said, I need to finish the series. The early seasons were so good. I owe it that. And I did. I finished it. And the one positive thing I'll say about the final season is they did get back to doing Jim and Dwight right. Their interactions were funny and they were good. And just about everything else about the plot was bad. But those two did a good job.
Too many new characters that weren't thought through by then.
Plop and Clark, I think were their
And
names.
Nellie.
Oh, don't even get me started.
We've talked about how The Office is really popular now. There has also been a little bit of backlash to it, of course, as there would be to anything. And I think it's mostly centered on some of the meanness of the show, just being a little bit of what I mentioned before. Early on, you get some of, well, no, throughout, a little bit of what could be perceived as punchlines at the expense of underprivileged people.
Sure.
I think for the most part, and this is me as a privileged person. I mean, I'm a very poor person, but I am a white guy. But I think that most of it is done with the right intent. And I think a lot of it is very pointed in making Michael look stupid.
I was struck by how interesting of an in-between time period The Office's kind of heyday was, where we were far enough along where we knew like that stuff was wrong, but I don't think we were quite far enough to know that you probably shouldn't even joke about it, is kind of how I took that. They kind of do some of that stuff that I think at the time was just low-hanging fruit. Oh, it's silly that a white guy would not make any attempt to understand a black guy. And it was maybe more of that. That's a guaranteed mainstream comedy. People will laugh at that. And now you see it as a little bit more tasteless than you might have at that time period. So I think there's a little bit of that. It was caught in between. It obviously wasn't backwards. Like most of the shows we've done that were old were not too bad either, but it had the understanding that modern times should, but it wasn't all the way there. It doesn't seem like.
The moment you point out, Spencer, I think they did it well enough in a sense that it becomes really clear Daryl is making fun of Michael. But again, you wouldn't do that now, probably. You would just find another way to make Michael look ignorant of other cultures.
I'd say like fat jokes on Kevin. That's a low-hanging fruit thing we shouldn't have done.
Those are the laziest ones. And in season 1 and some early in season 2, there's a little bit of what is a taboo thing we can talk about, like the sexual harassment episode. We'll do a discrimination episode.
But overall, you're right. Product of the time, it meant well, I think, overall. And a lot of really smart, well-intended people made it. So I think it gets a pretty big pass in a lot of ways, and it should. But you're right. If it were made today, I think it would be a pretty different show in a lot of ways.
Some of the jokes that they knew this is wrong, but it's like funny that it's wrong, they probably would just not have used at all now in this time period.
And again, none of them are, I don't think any of them are mean-spirited, but you would think there'd be changes. There is another element of the show I've seen criticized. This is more back when I was on Twitter, but I saw a couple of articles linked, which is, Pam and Jim being kind of bullies.
Oh, Pam and Jim are awful.
But I think that is a strength of the show. I think sometimes when people criticize, like people are like, oh, now The Office is bad because I realized Pam and Jim are bullies. No, I think that's a built-in, like, that's their complication.
They're fleshed out.
They're not clean either, 100%. I thought that was obvious by the fact that Pam is engaged and really wants to be with Jim, and Jim doesn't care about that. And I don't think that we're supposed to read moral purity into any one character. I think that is a flaw of modern media criticism. And this is truly, I can say, both sides on this one. Everybody's got an idealized version of what they want their characters to be to represent their views. If you're telling a story, you fucking better not have all your characters have your exact same views.
Well, yeah.
Not interesting at all.
Yeah, I thought they actually did a good job of, even in the ones we saw, where Jim is likable, but he is not a saint. Like, he sometimes has, he has some mischievous ideas sometimes and doesn't always try to necessarily do right by others. So he's not supposed to be perfect and, like you said, pure.
And I think that's the bad criticism of, for example, Pam and Jim, is that they're awful people. I think that's just a flat, bad, boring criticism.
Yeah.
The good criticism is they're obnoxious.
Yeah.
Particularly as the series goes along. I quit finding Jim and Pam cute pretty early in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's okay.
I was
because it adds depth.
Yeah, it does. And I think seeing them progress that way accidentally makes sense and works.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of the arc of a relationship.
And that they're two people who they eventually just settle for their lives as paper people until the final season when Jim makes a lot of money with sports or whatever.
I was shocked in season 2 how charming I found them together. Because later I did not.
I really can't say enough because you see it so much when you watch The Office that you take it for granted. But those little expressions that Jim makes are perfect. You've seen them so much by now that you kind of forget about it and it doesn't matter anymore. But John Krasinski, we talked about up top with the characters, the actors that were meant for the characters, he embodies that just as much as the others. He's really good at that role.
I think his lack of showiness was a big part of why he got that role too. It's more like facial expressions and what you can do in muttered tones.
And he still has said some lines in ways I've never heard anyone else say a line. It's just like, there was one thing that I don't remember the episode, but Michael tries to talk him into something unpleasant for him, and he says, "That doesn't sound like a thing I'm going to do."
The health plan one, I just watched that one again.
Okay, yeah, you don't know how he's going to finish that. Like, you think he's going to doesn't sound like something I'd want to do, but he says something I'm going to do. And it's just unexpected stuff like that. His little tone, his sarcastic tone, which is almost like a Jason Bateman sort of thing, where he has that thing he does and he does it really well.
It's actually a really good comparison. He is, the character of Jim is totally a Jason Bateman type. Straight man, kind of an asshole a little bit, but you root for him anyway to a degree.
He also says Dwight. He doesn't say Dwight. He says Dwight.
Dwight, which I've heard a lot of people do.
That's wrong.
We've kind of talked about the show's reputation, the show overall. We're about done here with our Office overview. Before we leave, though, I did want to ask the inevitable question. How do we compare this show in terms of its legacy in your mind to the other two we've covered? Because it's kind of an in-between in a sense that Seinfeld also went 9 seasons, like The Office. The Simpsons has gone 44 years and running or whatever.
It'll never end.
It'll never end. So there's a bit of the tarnished legacy there, I think, for all of us with The Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
With The Office and Seinfeld, The Office gets worse later in its run than Seinfeld. I think we all like the absurdist ending of Seinfeld, the last few seasons. But I don't think we do The Office. However, what The Office did for about 4 or 5 years was a lot harder to do.
Sure.
Probably balancing that big of a cast and dramatic plot. So it's kind of weird measuring it all out. Like, where does this show stand in your personal hierarchy?
I can say a little bit of what we mentioned earlier is that the peak of The Office was right up there with just about anything you're gonna see on TV for me personally. Like, it's just, and it was brief. It didn't last for a terribly long time, but when they really melded their really well-written characters from the comedic front into dramatic plots, that was something that I was really impressed by then and continue to be now. That little moment of season 2, season 3, and wherever it spilled over is incredible TV. I would pick that over a lot of shows, but the rest of it doesn't stand out to me that much. So when I look back on The Office now, it's not a big deal to me.
Hall of Fame peak.
Yeah, it really had that. And I've mentioned this with you before years ago, Brian. I think as an overall product, Parks and Recreations is a better show. It doesn't have the peak that The Office has.
It's way more consistent.
It's a lot more consistent.
We'll probably cover that in the...
Maybe next year. Yeah. Who knows?
It also wouldn't have existed without The Office, so that you have to give The Office credit for paving the way for that and so many other things. And it was a real pioneer in so many ways. It deserves a lot of credit. but I can't say that apart from nostalgia that I feel overly fond of it now compared to, any show that I used to watch.
I think that without dedicating too much brain power to this, because I haven't really thought about this before this exact moment, it's a pretty clear number 3 between Simpsons, Seinfeld, and this one, but that's not really telling the whole story because it's still a very, very good show that I will always have respect for. And this is one of the few shows, much like Seinfeld and The Simpsons, that I can just put on and have in the background and love it. And I could probably quote the whole episode too.
Yeah, it's one of those for me too. I agree with you guys, I think, because I think we're only really talking about a 3 to 4 season run of it being really great. The thing about it, and I'm not saying this rises it in my estimation necessarily, but like I've not ever cried watching Seinfeld or The Simpsons.
No, that would be weird.
Yeah.
I will say the early Simpsons do have emotional moments.
There are
but
moments.
Seinfeld would be really weird show to cry in. I don't think
His sob is destroyed with blood. He doesn't cry, he sobs.
The maestro.
Yeah.
No
Nobody
wins,
beats me
nobody
on the
beats.
list.
Yes, that's exactly what I was.
Your point is well taken, and that's because of how well they did handle some drama elements.
And like, I don't think, in terms of historical impact that makes it higher. I just think it's a thing to note that makes the show special.
It does. It makes it unique, that's for sure.
Well, before we get out of here, guys, I do have a special present for you, if you will. And that is that oftentimes we've done bonus shows available on patreon.com/Bootu Inc., where we just do different things. Sometimes we'll do a quiz, and that's exactly what we're going to do right now. I have prepared a
I
quiz.
thought you were going to list a few possibilities, but nope,
I
just
decided
quiz
not
and then
to.
right in. I like it.
That covers the whole spec of it.
No beating around the bush with this guy.
Well, you know me, I'm always to the point, and I don't kick around.
No.
I have a quiz that I pulled offline, and I'm going to quiz you guys at the same time, and we're going to find out what office character you are. We've done
Okay.
this before in different shows and so forth, so let's just get right in this. You guys can answer at the same time. I'll tabulate as we go along. So the first question in this, what office character are you quiz is, what is your ideal destination? And there are 4 choices for each one. We have A, Sandals, Jamaica. B, the warehouse. C, the sarcasm factory. Or D, art school.
Ooh.
What's your ideal destination, guys?
Oh,
Spencer,
I
let's start
like
with you.
that one. I want to learn more about art. I'll go to the
Yeah.
art school.
That's where you're sending me to.
You're both doing art school. Okay, got it.
I don't think that's surprising.
The Sarcasm Center would have been there if it weren't for the art school.
I have
Sure.
worked in a warehouse.
Yeah, I don't want to go back.
All right, question 2. It is the night before your wedding. Which best describes your plans? With A, rummaging through the garbage. B, comedy routine, but with props, like a Carrot Top, he's got a big spoon or something,
or,
that sort of thing.
or a Gallagher 2.
That's right. C, we have looking at the camera with a big smirk. Or finally, D, making sweet, passionate love to a beat. Brian, you're up first.
None of these jumped out.
Night of your wedding.
I
Which
guess I'm
one are you
probably
doing?
rummaging through the garbage.
Okay.
I'm hungry.
I'm going to do the prop comedy stuff because I've
sounds like you.
decided that I'm going to do an act during the wedding.
Hmm.
In this version of me where I'm getting married, I've decided I'm doing some comedy in that wedding.
This will be great. I'll
Yeah.
be happy to be there if you invite me. All right, number 3. Which of the following best describes you, Spencer? A, uptight, loves numbers, and has cats. B, frumpy, black. C, sad sack, enjoys filling out forms, weird and kind of red. Or D, Phyllis.
Ooh, well, I'm not Phyllis. Let's see.
Got me. I don't.
Yeah, this is a snort. We haven't had one of those in a
Yeah.
while.
All right, so weird and kind of red. I'm not really red. I'm weird. So those first 2 again?
Now we've got uptight, loves numbers, and has cats.
That's as close as we're going to get.
Okay.
I don't love numbers, but I don't hate them.
I think that's mine too, though there was another contender.
Was it frumpy, comma,
But
black?
I'm not red.
Okay. Well, let's put you both down for A there. Question 4. You have to buy one paper product from Staples. What do you buy?
Oh, you are talking my language.
All right. Well, you're up first, Brian. We have A, paper.
Hell yeah.
B, one of those big 3-ring punch things.
Oh.
C, burger. Or D, Brother DCPL 5500 DN Business Monochrome Laser All-in-One Printer with duplex printings and networking.
Well, fuck, I'll take that.
You like D?
I've had printer issues, although I gotta say the HP that I'm using right now, it's working well. It printed off these very notes.
Doing the job. Spencer, what do you think?
I'm going to get that burger because I've never had one from an office place before.
From Staples? Sure.
Yeah.
That's made of paper.
Got to try it.
It's a paper burger.
Probably
All right.
fine.
Couple more questions here, and we'll find out which office character you are.
Okay.
Number 5, What is your favorite after-work beverage? I think, Spencer, you're up first here. A, curry. B, second drink Mai Tai. C, weird artistic trait that never really pans out. Or D, purple sizzurp from the hood.
I would definitely want to try that one because that sounds adventurous, and
Got
I bet
codeine in it.
That's why I wanted that one.
I bet it's really good too.
So you're both going with that one, Brian?
Well, what's the other one? I want to see if I'm afraid I'm going to get the same character, and I
Sure,
want to
sure.
get a different one.
We had curry,
Curry seems like a good thing to eat
Drinking
after you
it,
get off
though.
work.
second drink Mai Tai.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just ice with a little
That's
bit
a
of...
Dundee's
yeah.
related one.
And then we have weird artistic trait that just never really pans out.
That seems right for me anyway.
That seems right for all of us. All right, we got you down. Last question here. Brian, you found the Scranton Strangler.
Holy shit.
How do you subdue them before the cops can get there? Do you A,
Stone Cold Stunner.
close, give them a chop to the solar plexus?
Mm.
Do you B, use your Cornell sweater as a rope? Do you C, go to business school? Or do you D, Phyllis?
I'm going to do the chop. I'm just going to do a really hard chop right to the chest.
All right, we got Brian for chop. Spencer, which of those four do you think you would do if you were to subdue the Scranton Strangler?
What was the second one again?
That's use your Cornell sweater as a rope.
Okay, third one, the one that's not Phyllis.
Go to business school.
I do that
Okay.
because I feel like I get some good strategies there and how to handle that.
All right, let me tabulate the
Okay.
results.
All right.
That seems like some really good tabulating.
Yeah.
It's my computer. All right, we have the answers here of what character you are. Let's go with Spencer first. You started us off. You are Special Agent Seeley Booth. A man of God, you refuse to believe anything scientific and know the only true way to make decisions is by going with your gut with no actual preparedness or knowledge. Your thick rectangular head is pleasing enough to look at, and you dress pretty nice, I guess, but not all is well for you as you have a nasty gambling habit.
Oh, I do.
It's
But-
developing.
Yeah,
But once you meet the right skeleton-looking woman who can't read lines, you'll straighten up.
that's good to hear. I'm looking forward to that. And you
All
can
right.
come to the wedding where I'll do that comedy act.
It all sounds just like him.
All right, well, Brian, you are Randy from Home Improvement.
Hell yeah, teen or not even teen idol.
Well, as the middle son, you're not only played by the heartthrob Jonathan Taylor Thomas, you're also one of a billion wizened old young children strewn throughout pop culture. You'll eventually go star in Man of the House opposite Chevy Chase, but
Oh, I bet that goes well for me.
you got to do your best to avoid getting beaten up by that big dummy Brad. So there you go. That's what office characters
I
you got
did.
for
I
it.
mean, I did have an older brother named Brad who's significantly older than me.
And he beat you up.
Would have been weird if he did with your age difference.
Isn't it like 12 years?
Nine and a half
yeah.
or something. Yeah. You know, this also reminds me, there have been times when, especially Van, but where we've dressed up in character for the show, and I was thinking, like, who could I dress up as? No one. None of us look like anyone on The Office.
No, not really.
Everyone on this podcast has either long hair or a shaved head, and no one on The Office has those.
Kevin could have. He just,
Chose not, and it
No.
works for the character that he
I have to
doesn't.
say,
Yeah.
it's because I'm so old. I was stunned at how young Kevin looks in these first couple
I think
episodes.
he is young.
He is. Like, his skin is very flawless. It was like-
Everybody, I was like, man, look at these babies.
I remember thinking that Jim was like a nice 27-year-old older guy. When I started watching this show, I was like, yeah, maybe I'll be like Jim when I'm 27.
Now I'm sitting there looking like Dwight's in pretty good shape.
By the way, Brian Baumgartner, who plays Kevin, he has a far better podcast than
Also
the
wrote a
Office
book.
ladies.
I haven't read it,
Mhm.
but I want to.
And yes, there's a little bit of like, okay, yeah, you're kind of latching onto the, B movie star or B television
Who
star
cares,
doing this.
man?
In his case, he was a bid character. It's
Yeah.
fine. Go for it. I just don't like the Office
Work
ladies.
those Comic-Con circuits. Oh, but to wrap that up, I came to the conclusion that technically the most physical traits I share with the character Phyllis. I have, long brown but graying hair and glasses. I read, and I was once a showgirl, big into Bob Vance.
Advanced refrigeration?
Yeah. But yeah, we'll be actually talking about episodes starting next time as Office Week continues. We'll start out with me hosting Season 2, Episode 22, Casino Night, the Season 2 finale, a landmark moment in the series. Then we'll go to Van hosting Season 4, Episode 13, Dinner Party, which is perhaps the best example of what is called cringe comedy that
Oh.
ever existed.
So hard to get through it.
And then Season 7, Episode 24, Dwight K. Schrute, Acting Manager, where we talk about what exactly is happening in Season 7 of The Office. So we'll be doing that. Until then, check us out on YouTube. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and we'll get tattoos of Creed. Van already mentioned the Patreon. We have bonus stuff on there. It's free, but you can pay if you want. Anyone else have anything they'd like to say before we skedaddle?
I've got one more thing, is I would like for someone listening to join our Discord community.
That's right. We have one.
Yeah. How do they do that?
You can go to the website, and I think there's some links there. Because I don't know how to join a Discord server.
I don't remember how to do that. Like
You have to have an invite, and the invite is on the website.
So go to bootuing.com and find the link for the Discord community. Click on that where you join it, and you will be a part of that. And we would love to have you.
And I'll make sure that's front and center.
You know what else? You can follow me at Loud Guitar Brian on Goodreads.
I wondered where it was going.
You can see what I'm reading because that seems to be the only thing I feel comfortable with doing online. What's an office-y thing that I could say before we leave, or one of us could say? It's really the first person to think of something.
May the force be with you.